wanted to say that I'm really grateful to be here, and it has been 8 years, since
you taught the decal class.
Exactly, since I left, and at the time I was an exchange student, and that's also the place, Berkeley, where I've discovered meditation, which later became my own topic of research. So I think it's interesting to be back here also because in so many ways meditation is a place that is a thing that is taking place here in California. And so my presentation today to you will be about my PhD, the topic I research that I've started now a year and a half ago at the University of Tours in the south of Paris, under the supervision of David Douyer and Gustavo Gomez Merria. And I will be talking just about a few aspects of my dissertation, obviously, because I won't have enough time to go in all the different aspects of it. But maybe just as a start, I think what could be interesting for you is that we have a clear definition of what is my object of study, which is meditation apps. And here, to be more precise, what I'm studying is apps that are non-religious app, so no religious meditation app, and on the other side, meditation that are issued from the MBSR movement. So this mindfulness-based stress reduction movement that was created by John Kabat-Zinn here in the 1980s, and that kind of took the principle of Buddhism into something that is more secular, so that it would be accepted in the society. And so the apps that I'm studying are coming from this axiological area, if you want to say, and the one that I'm studying are basically the most popular apps. So I study carefully 5 French mindfulness apps and 6 American mindfulness apps. So it's all of them. And I won't have much time here to dig into methodologies and the way that I'm doing data collection for this research, but maybe we can talk a little bit more about it later. It's basically a mix between qualitative data and quantitative data, and I'm using the methods of the app studies movement that I've been studying apps in the walkthrough approach. So I'm really basically studying the different interfaces, the different screens that appear on the app. So just to give you a little bit of background about meditation and meditation apps, a survey from the National Health interview from 2017 is stating that 30% of the US population have already tried meditation. 14 meditate occasionally, and 5 meditate daily. And also this is figures from 2017, so might have gotten a little bit bigger since
COVID.
Yeah, exactly. Can you see well?
Yeah,
it's good. Right, so maybe what I'll do is that I think that would be bigger. That's better, no?
Better.
Yeah. And I think the next figures that are relevant here is that since 2022, the digital meditation market is worth more than $500 million. So it's starting, to be big. And just to understand the field, there are really two meditation apps that have kind of a monopoly here, which is a Calm app and Headspace. And I'll be talking a little bit more about those two apps. But what I wanted to address in this presentation today is really to understand how these companies, these 11 startups that I'm studying, have transformed meditation in a way that they adopt a new way of communicating these ancient techniques and to adapt it to a normative environment, which is the environment of a mobile app. From the digital culture perspective, what is it, a mobile app? And on the other hand, how did they adapt meditation to a competitive environment? Because as I'll show, meditation now is part of that system, which is the startup app competition from the App Store. And so they had kind of to transform meditation to make it suitable for that environment. And so my question here today is to ask, how did that Zen tech industry, as I call it, have transformed meditation into a product that is in many ways closer to a form of mental fitness than to a spiritual practice? So in order to answer that question, I'll first talk a little bit on my first section about some specific features of the subject of meditation application. And in the second one, I'll be talking more about some critical aspects related to it. So, as you might know, because you might have been using meditation apps, I don't know, did you? No, nobody. So basically, a meditation app is a technological artifact to teach meditation, right? And so I think here it's important to remember that there has been a long history of technological artifacts of meditation before meditation apps. So for example, in the during the 8th century, especially in China and in Japan, they would be using incense as a timer. And so the length of the incense would be 30 minutes. It would be what is called a ko. And that was their way of measuring time when your eyes are closed. And later, we invented a way to reproduce sounds. And in the 60s, there has been this technique to broadcast a sound that was recording on LP. So it was very convenient because since this technology, it was possible to produce a sound for 20 minutes or so, which is more or less the timing of a meditation. And talking of which, I'm not sure actually the sound is working, is it? Yeah, it looks like it. Great. It was just a little check. So going back to today and to this artifact of meditation app, I think what is interesting for us in the department of rhetoric, and in France I'm part of the communication and information department, is try to understand meditation app from this perspective, right? And so I would try to detail 3 different layers in which we could describe meditation apps. The first one is that you can think about a meditation app as a kind of audio Netflix, if you want, but with very soft voice, giving instructions on where to place your attention. That's the idea. What is interesting for us here is that these digital technologies have enabled a way that we could also interact with the content. And so you might think about meditation in a way that it's an homogeneous content that is delivered exactly in the same way to any user, but what technology have enabled is that it's a totally different content for anyone. So the way that you can interact with these apps are with duration, the possibility to have a musical background or not, and also I think more interestingly to change the voice that is telling the meditation. And it could be a masculine or a feminine voice, for example, but it could also be a voice with different kind of accent. And I think where it's interesting here is that you have this dynamic in digital culture where the content is getting more and more personalized for any user, and that's the idea of the algorithm on the different platforms. But here, it's interesting because from the Buddhist perspective, it's not necessarily something that you want, that the content is personalized, because you want the meditator to be able to listen and accept to whatever is happening. Okay, so the second layer here is the connection between users. It's something that all the meditation apps have been using, is that you want to create a feeling of proximity and connection among different users. And really, like the two ways that the mobile apps have been doing that is that there is a way to see how many people are on the app at the same time as you are. And also, there are a lot of live meditation, as I've said before. So it's two ways that technology have changed meditation, is that people are alone somewhere, but they are connected and they are strongly relying on that feeling of being together. Third layer, it's what I call the nudging tools. So one key aspect of the digital culture and digital technology is that it has been using incentive techniques to help meditators in the realization of this very demanding activity, which is meditation, because, you know, sitting every day on your cushion is it's a hard job to do. And so meditation apps, they took all these marketing and cognitive science technique in order to help people, supposedly, but I'll come back to this question later, to help people to meditate more often. And so there are different kind of tools, from a system of reward to what I'm showing you here, which is some reminders to help people coming back to meditation. And yeah, that's something that I'll explain a little bit later on, but just to summarize here, the three ways that we could describe a meditation app is a catalog of audio instructions with a modularity of content, the implementation of connectivity between users, and the use of cognitive science and cognitive methods to help people meditate. So basically, that's the three different layers. And so now I want to dig a little bit more into what I call digital Mac mindfulness. So let's try to get around this idea of Mac mindfulness. It's actually an idea, a concept that come from this teacher, this professor of management at the University of San Francisco that you may know, Ronald Purser. And he has been describing what is Mac mindfulness. And for him, Mac mindfulness is like, you know, a double whopper, a thing that gives you some pleasure on the short term, but doesn't help really in the long term. And what I think is interesting for me in my PhD, my research, is that mobile apps, meditation apps, they have kind of enhanced this dynamic and got it a little bit further in the way that they are providing what I call a digital Mac mindfulness. So, you know, as everybody, I'm sure you have a smartphone, and you know that these meditation apps, they come from this space of the App Store, if you're on iOS, or Play Store if you're on Android. And in there, meditation really became a product in the very same way that, you know, this famous meditation teacher, Osho, is talking about. Maybe you have seen this documentary series on Netflix about him. And here he's talking about the way that he has been transforming meditation to make it a product, to fit it to the capitalistic realms. And really, when you got meditation into the App Store, that's what has become. And actually, Calm app, the biggest meditation app, which, by the way, is valued more than $2 billion, has really pictured itself as the Nike of meditation. You know, they see themselves as a fitness club in some way. And when you look at meditation in that perspective, you can sometimes wonder if some apps, some of these companies that basically they are startups, they raise money, they have shareholders, and they want to have more growth and more revenue, if really they haven't been sacrificing some of the Buddhist ethics in order to get more users and to keep them longer also. So that's the question I'm asking. And here I can share some great examples that I love. There is, for example, that company that is called Zenbase, you know, and Zenbase is a meditation app. Is not as popular as Calm and Headspace, but is basically rewarding its user with NFTs. And so it's what they call meditation to earn. And the more you earn, the more you get money, or at least NFTs. And another one that is great also is Headspace. You know, they have been using the voice of the characters of Star Wars to tell the meditation. And really, sometimes you're wondering, is it some kind of Disneyland that we are here, or is it a spiritual practice of any sort? But these are just some examples that are maybe a bit extreme. And probably what I wanted to share with you here more from this digital culture perspective is this idea of gamification that is part of all the meditation apps that I've been studying. So gamification is this process of deconstructing these so-called fun activities to try to understand their mechanism and apply it to something that is more demanding, right? And so some very popular apps have been, for example, Duolingo, that you can see on the left, that is helping people to learn new language, or Fitbit with physical activities. And I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into the way that meditation apps are using this gamification process, but in their apps. So the key idea here is really to do some data collection. And again, you might think that, you know, it might be something strange to produce data on something that is some kind of inner practice, that is meditation. And some could argue that it's a way to give objectivity to something that is really hard to grasp, right? But so the different kind of data that are tracked is the time spent meditating, the number of sessions, very importantly, the number of consecutive days, which is called a streak. And by the way, here there is a very nice story that I always like to share, is that at the beginning of Headspace, there was that user, very committed user, he really wanted to get to the 1,000 consecutive days. And so it has been, almost 3 years that he was doing it every day. And unfortunately, the app itself was not ready for 1,000 consecutive days. So when he got to that point, the app crashed and he had to start again at zero. And he admitted that he would have stopped meditation at this point. And I think it's just a beautiful metaphor. Yeah. And one other way that the meditation apps are trying to collect data is also some kind of declarative data. So the app would ask the user, "Oh, was your meditation? Can you rate it?" And all this sort of question. One last example I found very interesting as well is that recently there is a new generation of meditation app that have been using wearables in order to get some biometric data about meditation. So basically you put some kind of device around your brain and it collects electromagnetic data to try to see what's the electric state of your brain activity, which again, a lot of people could argue that might be interesting, but it might also have nothing to do with meditation itself. But it gives the people a feeling of keeping track and how can I get better? And actually, this brand, the Muse device brand, they actually organized the first world championship of meditation. And so they had multiple people using this device, and they would organize it, online. And there is that guy from New Texas. His name is Randy Nuxon, and 68 years old American, and he won the title 2 years in a row, 2020 and 2021. So that's, I guess, the first side of gamification is produce data so that you can compare your performance. The second one is to adopt the different codes of video games and implement it into the app. So, for example, something that is very common here is to get some rewards. So you meditate for some days in a row and you get some, milestones, and you get some badges, some medals. Sometimes you get some very fancy things like stuff that are popping around. And basically what it does is it's feeding your brain with dopamine in order to get you a little bit addicted to this idea of meditating. So here, I will pause a little bit, get some water. And yeah, I have 5-10 more minutes now to, yeah, it's good. Yeah. Because I've been mostly here describing meditation apps, and probably now I think I want to develop a little bit more the connection between Silicon Valley and meditation. And obviously, these meditation apps are part of this process, but let's get a broader perspective about it. And I want to talk about a little bit about what I call the new spirit of capitalism. And here, it's a reference to Boltanski and Chapelot, the French sociologists that have been describing capitalism in the way that it's using its own form of critics to reinvent itself, right? And so I want to show you how meditation is used in this digital capitalism to switch this kind of critique that could be meditation to actually fit meditation into this capitalism. So I think the first idea here that could be interesting is that there are no other companies in the world that have been so implementing meditation than the tech companies. So Google started its meditation program at the beginning of 2010. It was called Search Inside Yourself, wisely. And many other companies have, had a space for meditation. So, for example, Salesforce had a meditation room in every different floor until the building was empty, apparently. But and Google also, I want to show you how beautiful is their meditation rooms in their headquarters. But I think what's interesting here is that the intention of the designers of this program and of these people that would create these meditation rooms is not only to provide tools for personal development or for the employee to get wiser, cultivate compassion and an open heart, but really you can ask if it's not a way to get a new source of productivity. And it's especially true in the context of the tech companies where attention and concentration and probably cognitive faculties are very hard to maintain because of the job of being interacting with computers all day. And also because there is a great deal of stress in this kind of companies. So here, meditation has been used mostly to boost concentration and to kind of deal with the side effect of the stress. And from the humanities perspective, if we go back to some sociological reference, I think here we could also use, for example, Gary Baker expression of the human capital and try to see how meditation has been used to improve this kind of digital human resource that is the brain. So that's a reference. Second one that I wanted to share with you, because honestly, I felt that in my years in Berkeley, it had a huge place, is Foucault. Foucault is so popular here. It's, in my opinion, so much popular than in France, actually. But I think Foucauldian perspective is very interesting when you are trying to understand what is at stake with meditation apps. Because in his seminar about biopolitics, Foucault is talking about the technology of the self, right? Which is, as he describes, this practice of an individual that could mobilize all of his resources in order to attain a certain degree of perfection or better realization of himself. And here, I think what would Foucault might say is that meditation is a way to get a more productivist virtuosity in some way, to fit better in the capitalistic system. And I think it's interesting here to understand that neoliberalism has also asked people to use these tools that are meditation apps that supposedly are so accessible because everyone can download an app in order to, have them grow their attentional and cognitive performance to be better in the workplace. That's one key idea I wanted to develop. And the second one probably is what I call Zen washing. So in the past few years, tech companies have been talking a lot about meditation. There is a lot of discourse, of communication about this spiritual practice. And I think it's important to understand that it also takes place in a context where these companies have been criticized a lot since 2013 because of data collection and privacy, but more recently and also since the pandemic because of the disastrous impact it has on mental health. And so these companies have been asked to give a proper answer to these critics, and meditation have been really useful for them because they use it in a way that I call a form of ethical talisman, right? So that you have, greenwashing or even gay washing, and here they are using meditation as a way of zen washing to give a good image of this company, to give an image of virtue of this company. And there might be many examples of this that I could use. The one that I really love is the one about Amazon trying to implement some booth of meditation inside the different warehouse. And they call it conveniently Amazon meditation booth, and it came at a time where Amazon was undergoing a major communication crisis because a lot of their employees were reporting very poor conditions of work. And so Amazon, they try to implement that, but there has been actually a huge backlash online about it, referring about the hypocrisy of the situation. And so Amazon actually had to remove this booth. But I think it's interesting still, just as a communication strategy. Right? So in order to conclude here, to come back to the question that I raised in the introduction, are meditation apps some kind of enlightenment or mental fitness? I think, first of all, it's important to remember that these meditation apps have really enabled a form of democratization of meditation. And certainly, many more people had access to this technique of the mind. However, I think it's interesting to see that it comes with a certain degradation of meditation. And most of it comes because of the context it's coming from the context of the App Store, from the context of the people that are creating those apps in the Silicon Valley. And so to open the discussion, I think what would be interesting is to try to imagine what would be a meditation or a spiritual app that is sincerely trying to get people to meditate and not make money out of their stress. So some questions that I'm still asking myself are, for example, what would be a meditation app that would be created not only to get more downloads, but to sustain a lifelong practice? Or how do we give people a kind of readable chart so that they know which app have some kind of ethic principles, which guidance are valuable? That's another question. A third question would be, what would a meditation app that is run by meditation teacher look like? What would be an app that is not created and organized by shareholders? And maybe finally, how to implement more inclusion, more diversity, and lean toward more social justice in this app that are honestly not very accessible and that are very white oriented also. Mm-hmm. So that's it for me. Thank you very much for listening. And I'll be happy to hear about your perspective on this question as well. Maybe it fits with your research.
Follow up, just what I remember this idea of a degradation through technology, it seems like there were these earlier technical artifacts of meditation, the incense and the recording. Would you argue that those were already a kind of degradation, but that there's something qualitatively different about the digital? And it seems like that's the argument that you're making. It seems parallel to like Stigler's argument.
Yeah.
Any human practice is technically mediated, that there's something pathologically wrong with contemporary digital infrastructures that generate this kind of capitalist.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious if you thought about, I mean, the other, just to add on to that, the term that Stigler would use is the proletarianization of the consumer.
What do you call it?
Proletarianization, like coming from Marx.
Okay, yeah.
Because he has the proletarianization of work and then the proletarianization of the consumer. So it's almost like the proletarianization of the self.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was more like a comment than a question.
No, that's interesting. Yeah. So these are two different questions. For the incense, for example, I would say that some teacher, and in terms of methodology, rarely speaking from myself. I'm speaking about the interviews I got from a meditation teacher. And some of them would argue that, for example, time duration is something that is an hindrance because you're waiting for the time to end. And actually, some kind of meditation teaching will say, like, you just meditate until it's finished. But and I would say also the same with audio instruction. So I guess when audio instruction started, it was possible that the teacher and the student won't be together in the same room anymore. And many meditation teachers would say the words itself are not important. What is important is the presence. And so itself, I would think that many meditation teachers would say, yeah, it's a way. Yeah, I would say. And some other teacher would say, it's totally doable and it's good. But here, it got more into some Buddhist questions that is not really my field because I'm talking from the communication perspective. But I think it's interesting to see how the different kind of technologies have enabled different kind of teaching.
But there does seem to be something peculiar about the contemporary app version that you're being relatively kind to them. But
you think so? Yeah.
Well, I mean, in an open way, like the questions are open. It seems like you're willing to kind of open up some questions that the underlying, not the tone. The tone is very open, but I feel like the underlying argument is actually pretty strong that this is a kind of perversion of the integration of it into capitalism rather than critical perspective.
Yeah, probably. I think so. It's I feel it's important to be able to try to describe these objects, which are not really questioned, but coming from the Stigler's perspective, I'm also very much on the pharmacological aspect.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm always thinking that if you ask my opinion, I would say that so many people got in touch with meditation because of that. And I think, honestly, there is a great potential here. But the question would be more, how do we make it something that is really sustainable? And I understood that, well, that's the way that it unfolds, but there might be another way also. So my argument is I'm not against it. I think it's great, but I think it's important to understand that it could be different as well.
Right.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that. I'm going to start where David left off, but then go backwards. Different kinds of questions came up. But first, like David, actually, I was somewhat surprised by by your conclusion, because it had seemed up until that point to me, in terms of the argument about the challenge of there being any possibility of some sort of better form of.
Yeah.
Having said that, there are two related questions, and that is, apart from this context, can you think of a model of apps in which you saw some sort of improvement along these lines, in which there was something that to your mind detached itself from particular kinds of platforms or contexts, so that might provide some kind of structured model? A similar question I had was regard to the trajectory that you were seeing moving from the spiritual to the question of mental fitness.
Mhm.
Do you see that in any other contexts? And if so, to what extent is that dependent on the spread of apps? So one example which I imagine comes up in a different kind of, or arguably a different kind of cultural context, but not necessarily in the United States, a different cultural context, or in the West, would be something like yoga and yoga practices.
Yeah.
Has there been a movement that you see in yoga also that somehow parallels the question of something like move from something that is meant to have a spiritual dimension to something that's transformed to fitness?
Yeah.
Does that structurally mirror what you see taking place with meditation, or does it have its own features? I'm kind of wondering about those sorts of directions. And then the last question, which is just a separate question, which had to do with the biometric.
Yeah.
So for those, what I wanted to understand better is there a claim that they, something like with REM sleep or something like this, that they objectify in terms of the readouts that they have when someone is actually meditating versus not, so that it moves from the question of practice to a particular kind of state. So oddly, are they making a kind of qualitative judgment on the basis of their data? And then how is that performed, and how does that feed back into what qualifies as essentially meditation?
Yeah.
Good or better meditation.
Yeah.
Competition is really, that's crazy.
Yeah. So let me answer that immediately. So at least this app, the Muse app, the way that it's qualifying the quality of the meditation is that it gives you some audio feedbacks. So whenever your state of calm is strong, it gives you some sound of birds. So you have some, and the idea is actually that you collect these bird songs, because I guess you have to be still for at least 30 seconds to get a bird song. And so you compare at the end the amount of bird songs that you have.
Wow.
Yeah.
But it's based on wave patterns.
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah. And especially because the delta wave frequencies are supposed to be the one that are associated with mental stillness.
Mm-hmm.
But something that is interesting is that meditation, the definition of meditation is not only about concentration and focus of attention. It has many different layers. And what I'm trying to show is that the way that these meditation apps have framed meditation is that it's a lot about this idea of concentration and focus of attention, precisely because it comes from the Silicon Valley world. But if you look more about, is it something that enable an open heart, compassion, even wisdom? That's obviously more difficult to have a bird that is singing to your ears for that, right? And maybe another thing I think that could be interesting for that question is that there is also a different kind of meditation app family, which are the VR meditation apps. So in this kind of apps here, you have something above your head, but with the VR meditation, you have a screen in front of your eyes. And might seem strange, because aren't you supposed to close your eyes? But so They try to have some kind of meditation exercise where you would do some visualization, not move too much, try to focus your attention on somewhere. So there is also this other environment. And to come back about this idea, of is there any app that have this authentic spiritual teaching that is available? I think yoga is interesting, and actually I've not looked into it too much, probably because it's very rare that yoga is seen as a spiritual practice nowadays. As you said, it's mostly a fitness practice, but originally the very definition of yoga is actually meditation. So there is definitely that spiritual aspect in it, but it's very rare that it's seen from that angle. But what I've been studying more is actually the religious apps. And so, for example, in the US, that professor, you might know Heidi Campbell. She is the main researcher about digital religion. And so she has been studying religious apps, for example. And if you want, meditation is part of a bigger environment of religious apps. And so, for example, if you take the app Muslim Pro, I have a colleague that
Muslim Pro?
Muslim Pro, yeah. I have a colleague that is doing her PhD about Muslim Pro. They have more than 100 million users. By the way, it's created by a French person that is not even Muslim, but nowadays you have huge religious apps, way bigger than the meditation apps, actually. And for example, there is also that Catholic app that is called Hallo. And I think the question for them is exactly the same. And so that's why I think it's interesting, this question of meditation app. And my research is that actually it's not talking so much about meditation itself. It's talking about any kind of practice that wants to have something that is sincere and on the App Store at the same time. And how do you manage that?
Is the Catholic app something like about prayer, and
yeah,
the Muslim Pro would be everything from prayer reminders to like how to pray as well?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it started as a way to find the direction of the Mecca.
Oh, using the compass.
Yeah, that was the beginning of it. But then you have exactly, so all the features that I've been describing, for example, the nudging tools,
gamification, all that.
It's part of this discussion as well. And so again, I think that from a pharmacological point of view, in my opinion, I think it's valuable. It really helps the people. But then the question is, where do you put the cursor? Is something that you want to max out all your users, or do you want to deliver a spiritual practice?
Right. But it seems like the technology of the App Store and the app itself it inevitably drives it towards this maximized kind of like consumerist vision. It's very hard to design apps that are not designed around money.
Yeah. I would say it's specifically the App Store, not the mobile object of the apps itself, but really because the App Store is a store. And in order to be promoted on the App Store, you need users. And if you want users, you need to have commercials, and you need to pay Facebook to have more people on your app. And then some question might arise. Yeah. And I forgot what I wanted to say.
That was super interesting.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you for listening.
So where is your dissertation going now? Like, have you done much of the work?
Yeah, I'm halfway. So, in France, the PhD is 3 years, quite short from the American perspective. But I have one and a half years left, and now I'm writing. I've been doing most of the data collection. I'm actually here in California to have interviews with people from Calm and Headspace, especially designers, to ask them, how do you implement meditation values in the code?
Mm-hmm.
In this idea that code is the law, and also, how do you implement some values in the code and in the aesthetics of the app? But it's just the question I'm asking. I'm a bit curious about the answer, and I think we'll see. But and then also at the end of the month, I'm here to attend a congress that is called Wisdom 2.0. And you have a lot of people from Silicon Valley and meditation teachers that come together. And especially, I'm really excited about this discussion between Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, and Jack Cornfield, who is the main teacher at Spirit Rock here, important figure in meditation.
So the two things clash. Right?
And that will be interesting, because there is this question about consciousness and meditation. So there is all these arguments from the meditation teachers that consciousness is not something that is in the brain, and so because OpenAI is trying to replicate the way that the brain is working to get to consciousness. So there is this argument.
It's totally crazy.
Yeah.
So as a last question, if someone was kind of casually interested in meditation, what is the path that you would normally suggest?
Yeah.
And our apps, do they careful use of them? Do they have any value for someone who just wanted to kind of like start trying in a slow way? Or is it better to, I don't even really know how you start, to be honest. Read a book or?
I think, again, that's a place where we are lacking a little bit of sincerity from the apps, because the studies that have been made, and they are from the psychological point of view. So I'm not really using this material so much because it's not my field. But what the study found is that someone that starts meditation with a mobile app has greater chance to drop meditation. And the way that you want to start your meditation practice is with a teacher.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so, actually it gives better result. But I think since the question is, now there are so many people that start meditation with the app, how do we give a proper teaching, since it will remain as the main door of entrance for meditators?
But that's a very Stiglerian question too.
Yeah.
That transindividuation requires this kind of human learning.
Exactly.
Even if there was apps
in
that process.
Yeah.
The app by itself, in some ways, is a short circuit of that.
Yeah. So I think there are at least two ways that I would recommend. The first one is that meditation apps offer the service of having an interaction with a teacher, which none of them are doing, which I've
But you could also see that being one of those horrible apps, like where you're learning language and someone sort of comes up who's available. It's like a gig one. Okay, meditation teacher available now.
But also because from the tradition of meditation, there is a great link between the meditation teacher and the student.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that the apps are reflecting on the way that they could implement that. Also, they have one teacher that can follow someone. And also the second aspect that is very contradictory with the idea of the App Store is that at some point the app should say, just leave the app, time to find a teacher. You have been meditating, I don't know, like for
1,000 days in a row.
1,000 days in a row, or like even just, I would say even like 3 months, 6 months. Now it's time to get a proper teaching. Here are the different
7 people you can contact.
So, but because it would mean that you will lose.
I know, that's against the model.
That's against the model. And so that's why I think, some meditation app and any kind of religious or spiritual app could say like, it's not good for our business, but I think it's good for you. Mm-hmm. And that's not happening yet. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thanks, David, for allowing me to use the computer. I think it worked. I don't know. We'll see later. But there have been some people on the chat, like
Okay.
my dad was here, at least. Bye, everybody.
So this Melon is like the equivalent of Zoom then. You can't use it through Zoom. It's like a Zoom platform.
Yeah,
Because I
it's
like the way your slides looked and the way that
yeah. It's convenient, no?
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, it looks good.
Yeah. And also it's easy because I haven't been using it really, but you can also add, some layers of text
Yeah.
and text like that. So-
Do you have to head off?